Who's to start?
I'll start. Good evening, committee chairs. My name is Beatrice Weber. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a senior advisor at YAFFED, which is an advocacy organization dedicated to ensuring that students at Hasidic and Haredi yeshivas get a full education. To be clear, most Jewish schools are good. There are tens of thousands of Jewish students whose schools do an exceptional job throughout the state of providing general education alongside religious studies. However, there are approximately 65,000 students attending Hasidic yeshivas that are still failing to provide a sound basic education. Last year, I came here and spoke asking that the current law not be changed. Then, during budget negotiations, and again at the end of the session, a deal came so close to being passed that would have derailed enforcement of the law, which demands that every non-public school provides a substantially equivalent education to the local public schools. Children's education and their future were almost traded away for politics. I'm here again to ask you to stand up to these attempts to deal away children's educations. Please do not change the law. Let the state education department's regulation be implemented. Let state ed do the tough job of regulating the non-public school sector. The state education department has made great efforts to enforce these regulations despite political pressure. They have been courageous, and the regulation must be allowed to be fully implemented. They've put much thought behind this process. I want you to know that immediately upon this regulation, certain yeshiva operators challenged it in court. They lost, and they continue to try the court again and again to derail legal enforcement. But they keep on striking out, and legislative deal-making seems to be their last best hope. Let NYS do their job. Let them regulate this. This is about children's right to an education, not the rights of religious schools to discriminate. They are violating the state law currently by taking government money and ignoring compliance mandates attached to these funding programs. On June 30th, 2023, 18 schools were found to be non-compliant. Some of these offered no general education at all. That means students weren't being offered any English language, math, or science at all. Since then, what has happened? Nothing at all. That's what we keep on hearing from parents. The first school that was declared non-compliant happened on October 6th, 2022, and we're in 2025. And again, nothing has changed in that school. Yeshiva leaders are being told by Hasidic leadership that they have the highest ranking politicians in their pockets and that true enforcement will never happen. So nothing actually changes in the classroom. Students are continuing to fall behind and even sometimes graduate from their schools without learning the tools they need to find employment and fully participate in our society. We have advocated for state funding for remediation programs for these students. To date, we have heard nothing being planned, and we believe the state has a responsibility to do this.
Thank you, Ms. Weber.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for actually staying this long and listening to all this testimony. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to testify before you. Chairs Kruger, Pretlow, Mayor, and Lou, Assemblymember McNarelli. Thank you so much, and as everybody else here, thank you so much for listening to all of us. I won't repeat many of the things that many of the have testified before me have already said regarding the executive budget and particularly the foundation aid formula. I do have to say, because we don't get to say it often, we were pleased that the governor actually put a significant amount of money in the foundation aid formula this year. And for some of the proposed changes that she has made for the formula. Generally, we are in support, and the formula desperately needs the updates in the poverty counts. I will say that the change to the small area income and poverty estimates affects certainly some school districts, New York City being the biggest one, but affects 24 school districts actually. 16 of them are high needs. So when you make this change to the foundation aid formula, you can't just make that alone, right? You heard that the regional cost index is really important and will make up for a lot of the money that school districts were anticipating and they're not gonna get under this change. And in fact, their AQE has 2 years ago, we've been very long on the record proposing changes to the formula. But 2 years ago in particular, and there's a citation in my testimony, we put out a report with the Education Law Center that details a bunch of recommendations to the formula, many of which have been in the Rockefeller report and many of which the Board of Regents support. The biggest issue, though, is that you can't just take one thing isolated, right? You have to see it holistically, how it affects school districts. So if you are going to change the poverty counts, you also have to change the regional cost index. It would right size, it will make right for the foundation aid for a lot of school districts. In addition to that, and there's more detail in my testimony on all of that, I would urge you to actually make the changes to the pre-K changes that the State Education Department is recommending. There are a lot of school districts that have had low rates for a long time, and they need to update those. I only see I have 20 seconds, so I will say this very quickly. We are in a time where New York for All needs to be passed. Many kids are afraid to go to school. Families are living in fear of ICE. That shouldn't be the case. And we need to make sure that that is not the daily reality for them.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, good evening. It's an honor to be the last presenter of the evening. I'm, again, Jeff Smink with Education Trust New York. For those not familiar, Ed Trust New York is a statewide policy and advocacy organization that seeks to close opportunity gaps that keep too many students from reaching their full potential, particularly students of color and those from low-income backgrounds. Our work is data-driven and student-centered, and we work in partnership and coalition with civil rights organizations, education organizations, parents, and nonprofits across the state. Our policy agenda for this year and all years is premised on the belief that all kids, all children, all students can succeed in school when they're provided with high-quality, culturally relevant instruction and support that's equity-driven and student-focused. Even though the pandemic is behind us, we know, and I'm sure many of you heard about the NAEP results released today, showing that New York students remain below pre-pandemic levels in math and reading. Most concerning to us in the NAEP report is that over half of Black and Latinx students are scoring at below basic in math and reading. Below basic is the lowest performance level on NAEP, which indicates a lack of even partial mastery in reading and math. That's really, really concerning. So as a result, we're really urging state and district leaders to address this moment with urgency and increase efforts to give students and educators the resources and support they deserve, particularly in high-need schools. So our asks for the legislature this year, I'll start on foundation aid, which I know you've heard a lot about today. We share many of the concerns that have been shared all day, agree that the formula is flawed and outdated. We were disappointed by the governor's proposal. Again, needs to be part of a comprehensive set of reforms. As you know, as many of us have talked about, and again, as we've talked about, if these changes are adopted without these additional reforms, we could see cuts in places like New York City, which is the last thing we need right now. So as a result, we're recommending for this year that the legislature look at changing how poverty is measured. There should be a differentiated weight for concentrations of poverty, as was discussed in the Rockefeller study. Very, very supportive of adding a funding weight for students in temporary housing and foster care. We know this is a growing population. And finally, as was just mentioned, updating the regional cost index to better reflect current costs. I'm running low on time, so many of our details are in the testimony. I did want to touch on two things. Literacy is one of our top priorities and has been for several years. Last year's investment was a great start. We want to see more investment, particularly in professional learning for educators. We're asking the legislature to build on last year's investment. There was no money included in the governor's budget for K-12 literacy, and those stats I just talked about illustrate why we need more of an investment. And then finally, college and high school is another priority of our organization. We're pleased to see some funding included in the executive budget, but would like to see an expansion of those funds to help replicate successful models, increase access for underrepresented groups, and create new programs in parts of the state that have limited programming.
Thank you. Assemblyman Magnarelli?
Very quickly, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the three of you for staying here. I've been watching. You've been here just about the whole day. So I've learned a lot during all of these question and answer periods. Same here, and I want to thank you for being here. Thank you.
Senator?
Thank you, Senator Shelley Mayer.
First place, thank you, Beatrice, for being here and reminding us about those, those students are in schools where they are not learning what we need them to learn for substantial equivalency. As far as Ed Trust testimony, I appreciated you brought up something we haven't talked about, which is additional money for FAFSA, universal FAFSA and enrollment, which, we did pass the bill, and that's really is a good development. You say 3 million. Is that sort of a made-up number, can I say?
It's a number we came up with in talking with partners. Yeah, but again, the idea is to give community partners some support in schools to do that outreach necessary to meet the law's requirements.
And I'm interested in your college and high school data that you have in your testimony, which is, I think most of us are very supportive of the governor's proposal, subject to the details. But can you share with us that this data, students were more likely to persist and earn their degrees on time and to receive a degree? Is that something that's in a report that Ed Trust did?
Yeah, that's part. We have a tool called To and Through, which tracks students through high school and through college. And so what we did is actually looked at students that went through an early college program and saw how they persisted in college, and that's where we got that data from. I'm happy to share that tool with y'all.
Okay, and just on the AQE part, it is refreshing that this is a year in which AQE is pretty complimentary of the governor's effort. I think this is the first in my time up here. All that being said, you have additional asks for additional money in particular areas, and you're supporting the regional cost index being modified or extended to additional districts, particularly to make up for the shortfall in New York City.
Yes, we do. We are 100% in support of that. And in fact, I would say that it's not only New York City that will benefit from that.
No, I know.
Right? And
it's my district too.
It is kind of mind-boggling to me that we put Yonkers in the same cost region as Kingston or further up. Yeah, it's all in the Hudson Valley.
The whole northern New York.
Yes,
it doesn't make a lot of sense. Thank you again for your advocacy. Thank you all for sticking around. That's it for me. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Fefa Amaro.
Good evening. We're truly all the dedicated educators here as we stay here. We into the night. Beatrice, thank you for being here, and I appreciate your statement that yeshivas are doing, there are good, successful yeshivas, so I appreciate that. I feel like we've just grown from last year when we talked at this hearing. The last group talked about STEM, and we were increasing STEM funding to schools and proven that the more we put into the schools, the more they're learning. So that being said, the numbers that, when you're talking about this large number of kids who are not being educated, where is that data coming from? And I understand the one school, and that's on the city, but where is 65,000 last year? 65,000 kids are below reading level?
It's not that they're below reading level. In addition, they don't actually get instruction. They don't have teachers who are in any way qualified to teach. Oftentimes, those teachers don't read at a 8th grade level even, and they're the ones teaching. So we have gathered data on those schools across the state and have come to the estimate of 65,000. Unfortunately, none of those schools would qualify for any type of STEM funding. Trust me, if a school qualifies for state funding, they're not on our list. They're good. These schools they're not even hiring teachers that have graduated high school for the most part. Those are the ones we're concerned about.
Under our watch, under this committee, how is that still continuing, in your opinion?
Well, there are deadlines for them to comply, and I know the state education department's doing a good job of following up. They are understaffed, as they tell us often, and they need resources. And our request for you is to allow the state education department to continue doing their job, and if all proceeds as it's supposed to, those schools will come into compliance. Now, if there's additional funding available to train teachers or resource those schools, we're all for it. As long as our goal, what I'm here for, is that these students get an education. There's so many other advocates who are working for other things that yeshivas may need, but we specifically talk about the education in the certain schools that are not doing a good job, and the numbers are astronomical. And it's been an issue that's been neglected for decades, and therefore now needs extra resolve to ensure that it actually happens.
But those are your numbers, so I don't know if we'll have to question the state ed for the numbers that they're going to produce to us to say this is not being educated. They have gone in, but I have to say to you that saying on a hearing that people are saying that politicians are in their pocket or that things are being done in the middle of the night, I don't think that's a fair statement. I think if we're pushing to change some of the regulations that we think maybe aren't fair, that's something I support. But as the substantial equivalency is going through and we're trying to get regulations, there's a huge group that are working on that, and it has been moving forward. So I just don't appreciate that kind of statement as if someone's in someone's pocket. That's not fair.
I mean, we've seen news reports of this.
Senate?
Thank you. Beatrice, just to follow up, because I actually am one of those people who do understand that there are a large number of religious schools in the state. The vast majority of them do a quality education. I actually know that the Catholic school system, the independent school system, has no objections to our substantial equivalency because they're very sure that they are delivering an education that parents are happy with. And I have many good Jewish schools, yeshivas in New York City also, but we have a handful of them that clearly are not providing education. So my question to you is, we have timelines. What are the consequences when they don't meet substantial equivalency by X date? Are we, under our rules, are we supposed to take their funding away? Is that your understanding? What are we supposed to be doing?
Well, the first school that was supposed to come in compliance was the school my son attended. The case I won on October 2022, they were supposed to be compliant by the end of the last school year. They are not compliant as far as what I hear from parents, and in addition, for what we know from public information. All schools across the state are supposed to be compliant by June of 2025. So the deadline's coming up very soon. So what's concerning for us as advocates is when parents call us and are telling us nothing has changed. My child still has not had one science class the entire year. It's the same that it's always been. So it's been concerning because we're in January already. The deadline is in June. The consequences are very simple. When schools get any benefits such as transportation, security funding, anything, it depends on the fact that these schools are actually a school, and they actually have to check off to receive mandated services that they're complying with the law, which includes, the substantial equivalency regulations. So those type of funding would be removed from these schools, which we absolutely do not want to come to a situation where that happens. Our goal is that these schools step up and do provide the education as required by law and as is the right of these children.
Thank you. Assembly.
I think there are no other assembly papers. I just have a quick comment. Beatrice, I remember your story from last year. It's a very compelling story, and obviously things haven't changed for the better because you're here again this year. And I think I don't know how we get around this issue because we've tried, the legislature has tried, and for some reason it hasn't come to fruition yet. But I think we're going to keep trying because every child in this state deserves a quality education, and we're paying for it. And it makes sense for us to pay the high amounts that we're paying for substandard education